of course, the president-elect had a running mate.
And he did have a running mate, and that is Deputy President-elect Rigathi Gachagua. And that is where we begin our discussions here on the program tonight. That was this week, Monday. It feels like the days have all merged into one. I'm not sure I know what day of the week it is or what time. But here we are again. So let me just start with, very quickly, right off the bat, how did Ruto do it, Francis?
I think it was a lot of attention to details, and the mobilization aspect of it is what basically I would say clinched it for him. And then secondly, the arithmetic that was being worked on in terms of numbers favored him spot on. For example, he managed to consolidate quite a number of the vote basket in the Mount Kenya region, and the percentages that were being assumed Raila Odinga would get, between 30 and 40%, he didn't get it. Got about 20% or thereabout. So largely you can say the voting patterns in the mountain remained as they were in 2013 and 2017. Secondly, he managed to get quite a number of votes in what you would consider Raila Odinga strongholds, i.e. Coast and Western. I mean, there are some constituencies in Coast Province, or Coast Region if you may like, where Raila was getting 27,000 votes and Ruto was getting 21,000 votes in an area that ordinarily you would have expected a clean sweep for Raila Odinga. In Western, without any doubt, Moses Wetangula delivered wholesomely, especially in Bungoma County, which has a sizable number of votes. So I would summarize it by saying he consolidated his regions, and he managed to eat largely into the support bases of Raila Odinga.
Okay, and you've touched on some things that we will get into in some detail, including Ukambani Coast, Western, how that happened, as well as the Mount Kenya as a decisive battleground, because I believe that is something we discussed at length just before the election to see which way Mount Kenya would go. We'll get back to that in a minute. Linus, how did Raila not do it?
Very interesting race for Raila Odinga. And we must say that Azimio la Umoja and Raila Odinga must be in shock at the outcome, considering that all the pre-election opinion polls had projected a good performance, a big lead, some to the point of about 8%, some 9% ahead of William Ruto. And in terms of the traditional coalitions in the country, Azimio was by far looking bigger than Kenya Kwanza. It looked like it had more parties, about 25, whereas Kenya Kwanza was had about
legally three. Then of course there were the others,
three. But I think it came down to who organizes better, and it seems to me like Raila Odinga and Azimio were far less organized in the ground game than William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza. But there's something else that is of note. Kenya Kwanza built a stronger base of a core party in UDA. Because when you look at this race, Kenya Kwanza really is the United Democratic Alliance. That is mainly the core of Kenya Kwanza Alliance. Actually, what I'm saying is UDA can do without the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, but Azimio cannot do without Azimio.
Without the constituent parties.
Yeah, that constituents.
Right.
And that really mattered. And here is one thing that did it for Ruto and against Raila Odinga. All the ifs that we spoke about in this very desk, about if this happens, then this is what it will translate to. For example, the big if was if the traditional Jubilee areas that voted for Uhuru Kenyatta in 2013 and 2017 delivered the same kind of pattern to William Ruto, then we have a race. Did that happen? Yes, it did. Mount Kenya, North Rift voted heavily for William Ruto in the same way they voted for
Jubilee.
Uhuru Kenyatta and Jubilee.
Right.
And this really kept intact the Jubilee base. In other words, this is really technically the third term of Jubilee. There are two things that then happened. One is the huge gains Jubilee UDA, if I can call it that way, made in Bungoma County, which is a county that Raila Odinga used to win in the previous elections. So a huge chunk of that then went to the Kenya Kwanza UDA column away from Raila Odinga. The other thing that, the second bit of that, of course, is in the strongholds. And you pick one Ukambani and pick the coast region, where these were the traditional bases of CORD, NASA, Azimio. In 2022, those bases were nearly converted into battlegrounds. When you look at Mombasa, for example, it was nearly, was it 40, Francis?
I actually have the numbers here. Yvonne, I'll just pick up where Linus has left off about the exact number of voters in such traditional strongholds that have voted for Raila Odinga in previous elections. For instance, in Mombasa, Raila Odinga had 161,015 votes compared to William Ruto, 113,700 votes. Compare that with 2017, when Raila Odinga had 238,809 votes, and Uhuru Kenyatta had 99,190 votes. And then you can try and look at other regions. We mentioned Bungoma, Linus, and in Bungoma in 2017, Uhuru Kenyatta had 126,475, while Raila Odinga had more than double that. He had 284,786. Now, we need to look at the same number again in 2017 and look at how it looks, and it's completely different, Yvonne. Let me just get to Bungoma. There we are. Bungoma, we had 145,280 versus 255,906. Those numbers have gone down considerably, Yvonne, compared to 2017. And again, as Lina said, some of the reasons are how Ruto did it. He managed to eat into traditional strongholds. And I think if we've mentioned how Central came out and overwhelmingly voted for UDA and for Kenya Kwanza. But remember, we did not have the high numbers of voters in Central Kenya that we had in previous elections in 2013 and 2017, where they were in their 80%. And this time they're in their 60s.
While you're there, Jamila, could we talk about the voter turnout for just a minute? We'll come back and talk about strategies for a moment. You know, one of the lowest voter turnouts in the history of our elections. How did this voter turnout compared to previous elections?
We had around 65.5% voter turnout this year of 22.12 million voters who turned up to vote. It's about 14.2. And this is compared to 2017, when we had 78% of voters who came out, and 2013, when we had 86% of registered voters who came out to vote. Of course, various reasons are being given for this turn of events, including lack of voter education, low interest by the youth, reduced trust and confidence in the political system, poverty and youth unemployment. But Yvonne, the numbers really did speak again this time around, and 65.5%, down from over 70, almost 80% in 2017, is really something that the IEBC and the political class needs to look at very closely. The number of youth who came out to vote, let's even go back to those who even registered as voters, went down by over 5% between 2017 and this election cycle. And then those who came out to vote, the numbers were really, really low.
I mean, essentially what we're saying is 8 million people who are registered to vote chose not to do so or were not able to do so for one reason or another. That's a huge statement that I think, you know, even the president-elect who will be sworn in, whenever they will be sworn in, whether it's the 30th of August or, you know, should there be a Supreme Court petition, that should be something, you know, interesting for them to reflect on. 8 million people who choose not to come out and vote or who were not part of the process. I think that is something interesting. Look, can we talk about campaign strategies for a moment, you know, Francis?
Yes, but just before you depart from that voter turnout, I think it is a significant issue that you raise. A whole 8 million people did not vote. So basically, the winning presidential candidate had 7,100,000 and something thousand.
Less than the people
who didn't turn up to vote. The second in the race had 6.9 million. So it tells you if these 8 million people, or even let's say half of them, had turned up to vote, the numbers would have been very, very different. I think it is important to start addressing what are the reasons why these people did not turn up to vote.
Yeah.
Was it disinterest? Was it fatigue? Is it disillusionment, or what it is? And especially the youth voters.
Yeah.
I did rounds in Kiambu on Tuesday.
Yes.
I covered, you know, the length and breadth of it. and those queues, you could note very few young people. You know, if by looks, you know, you can tell that's a young man, that's a young woman. I saw middle-aged people queuing to vote and older people turning up to vote. And I struggled to ask myself, where were the young people? Why didn't they turn up to vote? And I think it's a serious issue that needs to be addressed. Are they probably disappointed that maybe promises that have been given previously have not been fulfilled, and so they see no need to turn up and vote? And I think it should not also surprise us that they didn't turn up to vote. I mean, look, in 2013 to 2017, the number of people who registered to vote, the increase was about 4 million, no, actually about 5 million, because it was 14 million up to 19 million.
Yeah.
If you look at the difference between 2017 and 2022, it was just 2.5 million, because we rose from 19.6 to 22.1 or thereabout. That tells you, if you're to calculate between 2017 to 2022, even averagely, look at the number of young people who have left our secondary schools. Almost every year we have had close to 1 million people or plus a KCSE candidates. These are people who are eligible to be registered as voters. Maybe as a proposal, IBC and the Registration Bureau needs to maybe think of another process such that when you get your national identity card, you also become a registered voter.
Yeah.
There's no need of asking people to queue to get national identity cards and queue again to be registered as voters. Actually, I see it as double use of public resources, yet you could have as well, while they are getting their national identity cards, also enlist them in the role of voters.
And while at it, just give them a KRA pin. Like, just do everything you know, at one point.
One-stop shop.
Yes, once you're over 18, at some point, you will start remitting taxes at some point in your adult life. But you raise an important point, and also the fact that, you know, the president will have to address these voters who are disenfranchised, you know, in one way or another. So it's not going to be an easy task nonetheless. So, Francis, you know, campaign strategies?
I think the major campaign strategy, especially for both teams, let me start with the Kenya Kwanza team. I think they simply identified where their potential voters were and gave them the message that would have, you know, brought them to the polling station to vote in favor. That is, especially the lower category of people. These are the people who have had to suffer the huge challenges in terms of our economy. And so basically by campaigning in the way that the Kenya Kwanza team campaigned, they seem to address them at a personal level. You know, those people who have had struggles with the economy, the cost of living, and so on and so forth. And you see, nothing is as big and as important as hope. You know, you can sell many things, but the one that sells easily is hope. If you tell somebody, I understand your challenges and this is how I will resolve them, then it becomes easy to speak to their hearts. And then secondly, they pointed the exact places they wanted to get their numbers from, i.e. the Mount Kenya region, Rift Valley, and while at it, raid the territories of the Azimio team, Coast, Western, and parts of Nyanza. Look at the voting patterns even in Kisii, for example. And Northeastern, for example, areas that ordinarily the Azimio team would have had a clean sweep, it became a battleground. So you can tell, for me, I thought it was more of a calculation, you know, addition and subtraction. Add the numbers in your territory, but at the same time, try and subtract as much as you can from your opponent's team. On the other hand, the Azimio team, you would see they ran a big players kind of a campaign. If you're to look around, in fact, I remember even in this very table, we asked ourselves, who are the big team players in Kenya Kwanza versus the big players in Azimio? And you could tell where, I would say, top heavy in terms of the national leadership. But the question is, did that top heavy translate to votes at the very bottom of it?
Okay, and
it did not translate to votes at the bottom of it, Yvonne. And we know we keep saying that the deputy president, the president-elect now, started campaigning.
Well, he is both, though.
Yeah,
because
he's
until
both.
he hands
until,
the swearing in,
So
he still remains deputy president, but is also president-elect. Yeah, a unique situation.
So I think
find
he's reaping the fruits of 4 years of campaigns, because I remember I took an Uber, and the gentleman there told me that William Ruto has visited his village 38 times in the past couple of years campaigning. So he was very familiar to them. He's from central Kenya. So he basically did not assume that he had the central vote in the bag, because he kept going back again and again and again to make sure that ground equals sour, which he did. And of course, Gachuri has spoken about how the plan was consolidate your strongholds, make sure kuna kura zote, but try and chip away a bit in your opponent's backyard. And that's what we saw. In fact, if you look at the Form 34As, Yvonne, if you're able to look at some of them and look at the numbers, in strongholds of William Ruto and also in the Raila strongholds, you clearly see that in his strongholds, he has like almost 90% of the votes. But on this other side, he's getting something there, like a 30% here, 40% here. In fact, the Bungoma numbers I was talking about, it tilted so much that this time, it was actually William Ruto who had over 200,000 votes compared to Raila Odinga with 114. If you look at 2017, how those numbers were. So this was, I think, a strategy that really worked. Kwenda kwa ground kabisa, na watu wajitokeze kupiga kura wakupatie kura.
And indeed, Deputy President-elect William Ruto took cognizance of the millions of people who came out to vote in his acceptance speech. Let's listen.
My gratitude also goes to the people of Kenya. The millions who listened to us, the millions who participated in our campaigns peacefully, the millions who turned up to vote for us on 9th of August, and the millions who have waited patiently until this announcement has been made. Specifically, I want to thank my fellow countrymen and women, because we have raised the bar in this election. Jointly, we have raised the bar. This election was much about the issues than the ethnic configurations that have always informed our elections.
All right, and we'll come back and look at, what happens going forward, because in that same acceptance speech, Dr. Ruto talked about, what he envisions his government to be like. But I want us to stay on the Mount Kenya as a decisive battleground for a moment. And I guess one of the things that was hoped was that President Uhuru Kenyatta would be able to carry the day, but the Uhuru factor somehow didn't work. Why, Linus?
Because it's simply the longest running election weapon deployed by Deputy President William Ruto in Mount Kenya. First of all, there was the narrative in the days of Tangatanga and Kieleweke that the president has ignored Central Kenya. He's not developing Central Kenya.
Actually, the word was abandoned.
He has abandoned Mount Kenya. And when you look at the facts, they don't really add up, because comparing the last 4 presidents of this country, there has not been a more regional-minded president than Uhuru Kenyatta in terms of just talking to Mount Kenya in his own language, sometimes to the discomfort of a majority of Kenyans who don't speak the language. And when you look at his appointments, is it true he abandoned Mount Kenya? All these things were actually could not pass the verifiability test. But either way, the deputy president and his allies sold it, and they sold it in beautiful packages, saying, he's abandoned you. I am the one with you. I come to your churches. I do fundraisers and all that. Because President Kenyatta did his politics slightly differently compared to the deputy president. He wasn't available physically in those rallies, whistle stops in towns, church meetings and fundraisers. He didn't do that, and I think he paid a big price for that. But then we must debunk one notion that ethnicity was not a factor in this election. That is not true. Ethnicity is a factor in this, was a factor in this election, because we are a country of identity politics more than ideology and things like that. And that is why the base of Jubilee in 2013 is today the base of UDA and Kenya Kwanza, and that is Mount Kenya and North Rift, specifically two big communities that must first of all give that base. I mean, why is the trend like that? It's because we are an identity politics country. And then the other factor is the deputy president has run the longest campaign any candidate has ever run in the history of presidential politics in this country. In 2013, just after 2013, we're talking 2014, 2015, we could hear 2022, 2022, 2022. Yangu kumi, yako kumi. 10 at that time, and yake kumi. So for the DP, this has been a long journey in coming. He's run for president for the last 10 years for a fact, and intensifying it after the handshake in 2018. So the mountain region also had one other factor. Mount Kenya has always voted dutifully against Raila Odinga for 3 previous elections. 2007, they voted heavily against him.
Yeah.
2013, they voted heavily against him. 2017, twice they voted heavily against him. Was it sold as, it's that guy again? Of course. It was a choice between that guy again and the guy we told Yango Kumi and Yake Kumi. Yeah, and then the promise. Which is why, for me, the test of ethnicity is yet to be done. We tried one in 2002 when Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta, both candidates from Mount Kenya region, were the main candidates. So the rest of the country tested what it feels like to vote in a way that's not really ethnic. You are choosing one candidate who is not really from your community over another who is also not from your community. The real test for Mount Kenya voting patterns will come in the next election, when for sure Raila Odinga is not a factor, he's not in the ballot. He's been in the last 4. Actually, it's 4. He skipped 2002. He only ran the first time in 97. So the last continuous 4, he was a candidate. And so it was very easy to mobilize Mount Kenya. Say, no, he's there again. So do you want that fella again or this one? So it was, in a way, so sorry to put it this way, a choice between which is the lesser non-local.
Yeah. And
Yvonne.
I want to pick up as well on the Uhuru factor.
Yeah.
Because he played a big role in this. There was Sagana
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. There was
actually even almost another 4.
A 4th, yeah, just days to the election. So he wasn't able to turn that around.
Absolutely. And I look at it this way. Listening to the sentiments on the ground, especially in the Mount Kenya region, you could tell protests. You could feel protest.
Against who?
Against the president.
Okay.
Because over a period of those years that Linus talks about, the president was always a subject. 1, abandonment. 2, alleged betrayal. Very many negative things were being said about him. And you remember even during the Kenya Kwanza campaign rallies, even at the doorstep of President Uhuru Kenyatta's home in Gatundu, the very same message was spoken. So you could tell, 1, there was a language of rebellion that degenerated into protest vote on the election day on Tuesday. And the Mount Kenya region, Yvonne, rarely splits its numbers. The closest it ever came to splitting its numbers was in 2002, when it had 2 of its sons on the ballot, Mwai Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta. And even then, you could see how the numbers worked up. Look, in 1992, 1997, 2007, 2013, 2017, you could tell where the numbers were. And even in this time, even as Linus explained it very well, surprisingly, this is the one time that Raila Odinga has received the highest number of votes he has ever received from the Mount Kenya region. I mean, you're talking about counties like Kiambu, where he got 25% of the votes cast for the presidential election. But in other areas, he may have gotten slightly higher numbers than he got in 2013 and 2017, but the totality of the picture is that he still received way less votes than what William Ruto did. So the question is, was President Uhuru Kenyatta effective in selling the candidature of Raila Odinga as his preferred successor?
Or was he in fact a hindrance?
Probably he was. Or maybe the Mount Kenya population was, we respect you, we voted for you 3 times, but on this one, allow us to be. I would sense that was the language thereabout. Look at the numbers, and the numbers will not lie. In Nyandarua County, for example, Raila received 49,228 votes. Compare that to William Ruto's 189,519. That is 20.46% and 78.6%. Go to Nyeri County. Raila, 52,052. William Ruto, 272,507. Go to Kirinyaga, 37,909 against 220,984. Go to Muranga County, 73,526 against 343,349. Finally, Kiambu County, 210,580 versus 606,429. So the answer is simple. The candidature of President Uhuru Kenyatta may have tried to sell the candidature of Raila Odinga, but it was not accepted on the ground.
All right.
There is another point that should be made about this Uhuru factor, and that is the fact that the DP managed to really tap onto the frustration of people on the ground over the performance of the Uhuru government, which is part of basically. He's been the deputy president of this government. But he's run against it also and done it so successfully because, look, it's not been a wonderful 10 years when it comes to, among other things, economic performance. Yeah. And when it comes to matters economy, the region that took the pain most is Mount Kenya. There's something they speak of in very painful terms, and that is the Kirinyaga Road business community, if you can call it that, about importation of goods and things like that. They felt he did not stand with them, and that the DP will actually stand with them. So he's been very good at tapping at the frustrations of people, the frustrations people have against the very government that is served.
And when, Raila essentially said fuata nyayo, that he would fuata nyayo, that's exactly what they didn't want to hear, because they thought, translated that into more of the same with a tough economy, more of the same with reduced earnings, loss of jobs. And whereas, and this is one thing that is interesting, the deputy president able to repudiate a system that he was literally a part of, and reject that and come out in a way that says, okay, I am not part of that, and I signal change and something different for the future.
And that was the narrative, Yvonne, that I think the deputy president really tried to hammer during all his campaign stops, saying, okay, whatever happened between 2013 and 2017, I was a part of it. Yeah. But since the handshake kwenda mbele, I was not part of it. Remember, nilitengwa, handshake ilifanyika, I was not involved.
Big Four was
not followed and all that. And it seems to have actually gotten into people's minds and hearts in central Kenya that, hey, we are not happy with how things have been. Yes, the deputy president is the deputy president of the Republic of Kenya, but he was not involved. Alitengwa. So anything that went wrong, he was not a part of it. So anything that went wrong, they squarely blamed it on the president. And fuata nyayo really was not what they wanted to hear coming out of Raila Odinga's mouth, saying that, okay, it will be almost what you're saying, the same thing. Are we ready to have the same thing for the next 5 years? Looking at how the past 5 years have been, other factors notwithstanding like COVID-19 and all that, really people were tired. And I don't think anything that the president would have said in any of the campaign stops, in vernacular or not, would have really made a difference. And someone may go as far as saying, pengine angejiondoa mapema, maybe it would have made a difference for Raila Odinga in central Kenya. But hey, the numbers speak for themselves, and they're really overwhelming in favor of UDN.
Yvonne, here's the trick. Look, all the good things, and this is what I also saw as a contradiction. The good things were shared. The successes of the Uhuru administration were shared. Tulijenga, tulitengeneza, they were shared. But the challenges were not shared. The challenges belong to the president. And maybe it's because President Uhuru Kenyatta didn't get an opportunity or didn't take advantage of that to come out and defend himself and defend his administration. So his silence probably meant that, you see, what the DP and his team was saying was right. So that the president didn't get an opportunity to come and respond. And when he attempted to do so, it was quite late in the day. I mean, it is in the last few weeks of the campaign process that you'd hear the president talk about some of the allegations that have been made against him. But you see, there's something about silence, especially when an accusation is made. If you keep silent for too long, it is assumed to be true. So I would think even for this situation, the same could have played out for President Uhuru Kenyatta. And you see, there's also some element about a victim. If you
the underdog.
Yeah, if you become the underdog or the victim, there's some sympathy that comes with it, and people will say anaonewa, and you'd hear such sentiments on the ground like the deputy president anaonewa, anafinywa, anaonewa, and you see that has a way of bringing you closer to the electorate. But now, when there was too much silence, especially on the part of President Uhuru Kenyatta, I think it became very easy to tell the masses from the Kenya Kwanza team, this is what has happened. And if the president does not respond, so it was assumed to be true. And so and even the personal challenges that befell many Kenyans, the cost of living, lack of jobs and lack of opportunities. The story was, this is as a result of President Uhuru Kenyatta and his government. And so when he didn't get an opportunity to, or didn't take advantage of the situation to respond to some of these things, they stuck for too long. When he attempted to come and respond to them, it was too little, too late, in my opinion.
All right. Can we move to now, what all of this means? The outcome was declared by the chair.
But Yvonne, I'm sorry, before we go there, I don't know if we mentioned Ukambani, I think, as an important factor in Raila Odinga's votes. Remember, that region is, I think, one of those that really voted for him. In this sense, we can say Kalonzo Musyoka delivered for Raila Odinga in Ukambani. Because if you look at the numbers, they really, really do look good in Ukambani, Yvonne, if you'll just give me a moment to get there. In terms of the votes, watu waliojitokeza, although compared to the 2017 numbers, they were less, as generally was seen across the country. They really did come out and vote for Raila Odinga. If you look at places like Makueni, if you look at Machakos, if you look at Kitui, watu walijitokeza wakampigia kura Raila Odinga in a way that I think really was very important in terms of now getting to the 6-point-something million that he did. And remember, Yvonne, Kalonzo Musyoka was almost one of the really, really last leaders to really fully join Azimio. Remember what we saw? The back and forth, Yumo, Hayumo, Nataka hii, making demands. Remember even when Raila Odinga was naming Martha Karua as the running mate, Kalonzo Musyoka was at a parallel meeting talking about something totally different. But we can clearly see that his votes did matter to Raila Odinga and Azimio as a whole. He was getting almost, 75% of the votes in somewhere like Kitui. He got 74% in Machakos. He got 78% in Makueni, compared to 24% and 20% and 27% for William Ruto. So I think that Ukambani factor really, Yvonne, was very, very important in Raila Odinga's win, because looking at what happened in coast and traditional strongholds like Bungoma and those areas, this time, watu wa Eastern walijitokeza kama kawaida. I really want us to move.
Okay. I really want us to move.
I plead for a second. the same point that Jamila raises. I remember during this very same panel on Newsgang, we talked about the Kalonzo factor. And I remember calculating the numbers then. And the reason why he was one very much sought after politician is because of the understanding of the numbers that he commands. Look, he was among the last entrants properly into the Azimio fold after, that back and forth over the running mate position. But he managed to deliver for Raila Odinga 768,000 plus votes. This is 235,000 in Kitui, 304,000 in Machakos, 229,000 in Makueni. Vis-a-vis, William Ruto got 89,000 in Kitui, 1,000 in Machakos, and 59,000 in Makueni. So tells you he delivered. And that's why he was...
Also with the number of
parliamentarians. And that explains to you why he was being seriously sought after by both sides.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, for example, if he had gone the Kenya Kwanza way, the numbers that we're talking about here would have been
much bigger.
Way bigger. So that's the understanding.
Let's...
Another if.
Another if.
Yeah.
All the ifs we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Look, the results were announced, and now there's, what happens going forward, and the meaning of the outcome of that. And as we get to that and talk about what this means for the president and deputy president-elect, I'd like us to listen to the president-elect, William Ruto, where he talked about, how he wants to lead or run going forward, where he talked about the fact that he has no vengeance, and we can listen to that together with how he intends to run a transparent, democratic country.
I know many are wondering, especially those who have done many things against us. I want to tell them that they have nothing to fear. There is no room. There is nothing. There is no room for vengeance. There is no room for looking back. We are looking into the future. I am acutely aware that our country is at a stage where we need all hands on deck to move it forward. We do not have the luxury to look back. We do not have the luxury to point fingers. We do not have the luxury to apportion blame.
All right, so that was part of his acceptance speech and just talking about where he sees things going. But Linus, this is, a first in this country. His election and declaration as a president-elect, in many ways.
Absolutely. It's he's written personal history in the fact that he's the first politician to reach that stage on first try. He's running for president for the first time. And he's gone on record actually saying he has never lost an election.
It's true.
And that is from 1997 when he started off as Member of Parliament for Eldoret North, beating the then MP Ruben Chesire, who was quite an experienced kind of politician. And since then, he can actually claim to have won all the elections that he's run for. It's also a personal historic for Rigathi Gachagua.
Yeah.
First time MP.
in Parliament, yeah.
A first-time MP who was, this is first time to serve in Parliament, and now he ran as running mate for William Ruto. And together they're writing some personal history, especially if this is affirmed all the way to swearing in.
Yeah.
Because, look, we're talking of election petitions, and you know very well election petitions also by the 2017 president can go either way. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the interesting bit about that. But, when we talk about the meaning of this was also some good news for one Musalia Mudavadi, Jamila, who finally found himself on the winning side. Ended a jinx of sorts.
Well, Musalia Mudavadi has had an interesting time in politics.
Because he was with CORD.
He was with CORD and with NASA.
Yeah.
And then remember there was a time he was supposed to have been the candidate at some point, and then
Madimoni. Sorry, I have to return you back to 2002. He was he was actually the first running mate before the constitution was changed.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
he was vice president of in Kanu, Moi's last vice president. And Uhuru was candidate, and Musalia Mudavadi was acting as running mate. He was assured to keep the vice presidency after the election, and Uhuru lost. So actually from that time to now, he's never been on a winning side.
Yeah.
Jamila?
Yeah. I remember we were talking about the Mademoni. There was that time when mambo ilibadilika, but he has not been the winning side. But this time he is, and he was able to deliver 7 National Assembly seats. Kuna MPs 7 wa ANC ambao wanaingia bungeni, and that really adds to the total for Kenya Kwanza as a coalition. But Yvonne, remember the promises that were made before the elections to some of these parties that were joining Kenya Kwanza.
Or
remember?
Conditions.
Yes, 70%. Yeah. If you deliver 70%, you'll get this and that. And what is interesting already, I think ANC as a party has met and picked Musalia Mudavadi as the potential chief minister if the president-elect is sworn in and then has executive order whatever number and creates that position for him. But I think for Musalia Mudavadi, he's in a place where he has not been before. And of course, we talked about the numbers in Western Kenya. I don't think they delivered 70% because in his part, in my opinion, Moses Wetangula actually delivered quite a bit more in terms of the votes in Bungoma. We were talking about the numbers here. 114,000 for Raila Odinga, with over 200,000 plus votes for William Ruto in Bungoma, including the governor's seat.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things when you compare Musalia from, 2013 to 2017, remember we saw a very vibrant, Musalia Mudavadi when he was a member of NASA. He came up with NASA How. And, some said it was an evolution of Musalia Mudavadi, who before had been a safe pair of hands, and then who came out and, campaigned very robustly for Raila Odinga in 2017. But even more so now in 2022, you'll recall at the start of the campaign, Francis, they were everywhere.
Yep.
Especially Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula. And we'll talk about Wetangula in a moment because I think he's been the surprise. I won't go into the detail of the memes that were there, but everybody knows what people had said of the duo about who was more valuable than the other.
Who was going to deliver 70%.
Yes, and it seems the tables have turned. But there really has been an evolution of Musalia Mudavadi as a politician in terms of the energy coming out, going on the campaign trail, whistle stop from one county to the next, one region to the next. And that also was very visible in 2022. And then, of course, there was Moses Wetangula.
Absolutely. And I think the change in terms of how Musalia Mudavadi conducted his campaigns probably has something to do with how the team was also playing. I mean, if you join a team that plays in a certain way, you are likely to fit into the playing system of that team. And that probably would explain why he had to change his way of doing campaigns. But I remember doing that story on the Kenya Kwanza coalition agreement, and many questions were raised as to whether there was a 70% or not. Later on, the politicians themselves in their campaign rallies acknowledged that there was 70%.
Right.
Now, this is now the report form for that 70%, whether it was achieved or not. Let's go county by county. In Kakamega County, Raila Odinga got 357,000 votes. That is 71% of the votes cast in the presidential election. William Ruto got 141,000 votes. That is about 28% of the presidential vote tally, so to say. So the presumption is that Vihiga and Kakamega would be a heavy backyard for Musalia Mudavadi.
Right.
So on that account, at Kakamega level, did he deliver? The answer, of course, is no. Look at Vihiga, for example, his own home county. Raila got 114,000 votes. William Ruto got 67,000 votes. So in terms of percentage, is 62% and 36%. So on those two counties, I would say probably he didn't deliver. But if you look at the bigger team, maybe he will be told good effort. And that's why I think it was strategic for ANC to meet yesterday and say the designate for the prime cabinet secretary is Musalia Mudavadi, because that was the promise in the Kenya Kwanza coalition agreement.
Was there another possibility, or
maybe
or maybe
not?
It's taking your claim earlier on, huh? Just put some
aim for.
Yes.
Okay.
The stars. If you hit the sky, you're good enough.
All right. Then go to Bungoma County. Raila Odinga got 145,000 votes. That's about 35% of the votes cast in the presidential election. And William Ruto got 255,000. That is 63% of the total votes cast in the presidential race. So 100%, Moses Wetangula delivered. Of course, he had, together with him, other leaders from the county, talk about Ken Lusaka, the former Speaker of the Senate, who was also vying for a governor's seat in the same county and got it. But also remember, he had to move from Jubilee,
Yes.
the Jubilee side that was seen as Kieleweke, to the Kenya Kwanza team,
Yes.
quite close to the election, and that's how he also got the seat as governor. Finally, go to Busia, 226,000 votes in favor of Raila Odinga, 81%, and 48,000 votes in favor of William Ruto, 17%. So cumulatively, you can see where the numbers were. So
Yeah.
let's see how the agreement will be executed if
calculations.
the president-elect gets to be sworn in as president.
So there are people who delivered, and we've talked about those numbers, but then there's somebody who I think, survived by a whisker and who made the move or the switch
the right
just
time.
in the nick of time, at the right time, and found himself on the winning side. And that's Dr. Alfred Mutua, the now outgoing governor of Machakos County. Linus?
Yes, and Alfred has made a career out of timing it just right, being at the right place at the right time. And that is if this election result is upheld and Ruto sworn in as president. Remember, his agreement would offer his party one seat in the cabinet. And it's very predictable where that cabinet slot would go if that stage is reached. The agreement actually had required the Kenya Kwanza administration to give him one slot, I think, in a service ministry.
Yeah.
I think there was talk of the Ministry of Water. But what we're yet going to see, and this is something that we will wait to see, is whether all these agreements will actually be interpreted as they are and as they are written in the pre-election text.
Yeah.
But even then, in line with what Linus is saying, you can tell because the number of rallies that the deputy president and his team had conducted in Machakos, in Makueni and Kitui before Alfred Mutua came in, would you say the numbers that he got are as a result of his efforts? Probably not. In the event that he did not, another if, but in the event that he had not joined the team, would the numbers have been different? Maybe not. So
I don't know whether there'll be such an audit of where the numbers coming from. I think if the election is concluded in the manner it's settled right now, then I don't think Musalia Mudavadi or Alfred Mutua will actually go and have their report forms checked that, okay, did you hit 77? Was it 70% for Musalia? And also quite a very high one, was it 60?
35%.
35% for Alfred Mutua in Ukambani, quite a tall order. I don't think it'll be that strict interpretation. I don't think also reality in politics works exactly that way.
Yeah, that's true. Bring in your report card. Let's see how you performed. I want to talk about, as we carry on with the outcome of this or what it means. So, we've focused a lot on Ruto, the Kenya Kwanza and UDA and the numbers that were there. But there was one person who did not agree with these numbers, and that is one Raila Odinga, the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya presidential candidate. Let's listen to him rejecting the results of the August 9, 2022 presidential election results.
The figures announced by Mr. Chebukati are null and void and must be quashed by a court of law. In our view, there is neither a legally and validly declared winner nor a president-elect. Mr. Chebukati's announcement purporting to announce a winner is a nullity. For avoidance of doubt, I want to repeat that we totally and without reservations reject the presidential results announced yesterday by Mr. Chebukati.
Yvonne, it was, I don't know how to say it, almost expected, I think, following what we saw, the acrimony we saw at the Bomas of Kenya before the results were announced. And I think we've seen those images, the push and pull, the split screen that we had, one side Wafula Chebukati and on the other side 4 commissioners, it was almost expected that
this is what, as well from the
Bomas of Kenya, exactly. Because I think all the candidates were expected at Bomas of Kenya before the announcement was made, because 3 were there. William Ruto, George Ojakoya, and David Maure. But Raila Odinga was not there. And Yvonne, remember, there was a lot going on social media about Tumeshinda. You know, each side claiming victory. Like, people didn't really know who had won those elections. Like, every side is claiming Nisisi, Nisisi. You know, there's even a time you're trying to read people's body language, like, wamefurahi sana, wamekasirika, pengine hao ndo wameshinda. You know, when the tallying process was going on at Bomas. So it was very, very confusing. And it was expected he would go to court. And I think the events of 2017 really inapatia impetus kidogo to do that. Because remember 2017, we're not saying that's going to happen now, because of course we're waiting for them to go to court. They said they would. To file, but that happened in 2017. Elections, presidential results were nullified, and we had a repeat poll and all that. But then this was expected. I think also even for those who support Raila Odinga and the Azimio la Umoja, One Kenya 6.9, I think almost 9 million of them. I think they needed to see that, okay, he's not giving up that easily because of the push and pull and all that. We saw issues with the Form 34A, 34B, 34C, all those issues that came up. I think also for the supporters, they needed to see that, haijaishia hapa, tunaendelea mbele twende mahakamani. But I think, Yvonne, something we've said, and even said in our intro, was that if you look at the country now and compare it to previous elections around this time, it's calmer. People are have gone back to work. Schools have reopened today. In the business news, I saw the story where businesses wamefungua. It's not back to 100%, but the picture in the country is a bit more calmer compared to previous elections. I don't know kama watu ni kukubali na kusonga mbele wakingoja Supreme Court ruling and all that. But I think now, as you say, and that cliche, all eyes are now on the Supreme Court if the case is filed by Monday, 2 p.m.
Can we listen to Raila Odinga saying that he will pursue this route of the Supreme Court, and then we can come back and talk some more.
To note that we will be pursuing all constitutional and legal options available to us. We will do so because we regard the many flaws in the elections and the wrongs committed by the IBC as fatal to the process and the outcome announced by Mr. Chebukati.
Interesting times, and I just want to go to the point that Jamila was making earlier, which is that of the public reaction to these events. And I think what we are witnessing is a public that is increasingly growing to understand that this is our environment. Every election, I think since 2013, has tested our institutions. And we've reacted differently since 2007. In 2007, we went the primitive route, which is the results have been messed up. Look for whoever you voted against and probably fight them. It was very, very ugly and primitive. In 2013, we all held back and said, hey, there is the Supreme Court. We have a new Supreme Court that actually decides matters to do with the electoral disputes when it comes to the office of the president. And you will remember that in 2013, it was a televised event. And can we even at this point say that one of the biggest televised shows, reality TV in Kenya, is actually presidential petitions? People look forward to it for the sheer performance of the legal minds that will turn up there, make those arguments, table the evidence.
Decidendi.
Yes.
I remember some of those phrases.
Absolutely. And of course, the judges, the performance is usually a very, very legal show. And so with time, we are now starting to get accustomed to how it actually works. In old days, you have a president-elect waiting this long to be president. It doesn't happen. In 2007, you will remember that we did it the gross way. You know, Mwai Kibaki was sworn in at actually past sunset.
Past 6 p.m.
Yeah, past 6 p.m., which was indeed something close to a criminal activity. That is why the Constitution, when it came in 2010, decided also that the swearing in of the president will be between noon and 2 p.m.
Yeah.
Actually, is it noon and 2 p.m.?
Yes.
Around that time. And this is to order the place, basically make the process transparent. And I want to just put an explanation to this attitude we are seeing from the public. And that is one of the reasons is we've been seeing a progressive opening up of the electoral space. 2022 was a much better, more transparent election than 2017. There's that public portal thing where everybody's told, okay, it's in there, go in and
The server.
and count. In 2017, remember, the server was, actually people are mistakenly called, it's not a server, it's a portal. I sat in the tallying center not too far from me, and the difference is quite huge. In 2017, of course, you remember the secrecy, the cloud of secrecy around how the vote is counted and tallied. This time, Kenyans are being sent to their own polling station. It's only about 700 people maximum in one polling station.
Yeah.
Go and vote there, observe that, and that is the final vote, as per the Minor Kiai case. So we owe the current attitude, especially among the public, to the fact that they know these processes are there, the institutions are there, and it's a huge measure of trust to see that the public are actually waiting. If there is a court case, so be it. Let it go to the Supreme Court. We will listen to it and see. And then the other thing is, these systems have been tested to the maximum, because in 2017, the Supreme Court actually nullified a presidential election. So what is the worst thing that can happen even now?
Yeah.
Nothing. There's nothing worse that can happen. I think we can nullify this, hold another one in October, nullify it again and hold another one in another 2 months.
Yeah.
We can do that because the systems actually work that way. So I want to say that the stability, the environment we are seeing is more because the general public, especially the ordinary mwananchi, is starting to appreciate how it actually works. The problem normally starts at the top, the political class, the political elite, the organizers. Because if it's too quiet, maybe you want to approach it a different way. And that is why, historically, our troubles are actually organized. They're not spontaneous. And I'm just talking of a worst-case scenario. Luckily, we don't have that kind of environment right now. We saw very well that today people are taking their children back to school. And we are waiting for Monday to see if there is any presidential petition that has been filed.
Yeah, I just want to, sort of talk a little bit about the public expectation, and that was revealed in Faisal Ahmed's story today. Many of the business owners were saying, well, business was slow, which typically happens. And that was by various surveys, including the one that was done of CEOs right prior to the election. It was done by KEPSA and Infotrack. And CEOs were also optimistic that, the business environment was not going to be as heavily affected as 2017 and 2013 before that. And the business people were saying the same thing. In fact, in that story that aired just tonight, they were saying, look, if there will be any trouble or any dispute, it'll be resolved at the Supreme Court. And so in some ways, we have to thank the 2010 Constitution for setting up the Supreme Court. And like Linus, you were saying, it has been tested in 2013, when they upheld the vote, in 2017, when they overturned the results of the poll, and then again with the BBI. So Kenyans have had this great interaction with the judicial system and how it resolves particularly electoral or political disputes, and have no doubt that, the same would be possible now. So when you take a look at all of the things that were being said, by members of the public and on social media about Forms 34A, about Form 34B, about 34C, who signed it, who didn't, why didn't they, the IBC commissioners, which we'll talk about in a moment, they can at least trust that there will be, the neutral arbiter, which will be the Supreme Court of Kenya. And like Linus, you said, what's the worst that could happen? That it could be overturned? That's something we're willing to live with, as opposed to 2007, what's the worst that could happen, which would be total chaos. So, the Supreme Court has really just then set the tone for that look, there is an avenue for people who, are aggrieved by it. Francis, before you come in fact, Martha Karua did say something about that. And perhaps before we even get to that, someone was telling me about the Supreme Court process actually also helps those who have not won the election. Huh? You know, it's a process of, okay, you know, it cools down the temperatures. Not, okay, we have not won. What do we do next? Where do we go? Do we go to the streets? And so in some ways, it's sort of, you know, a coping mechanism. Okay, then even if the election is upheld and those who didn't win, you know, still remain in that category, you know, okay.
We tried.
Yvonne, it doesn't even
manages their emotion.
And it doesn't start up with the Supreme Court. It starts a lot earlier.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting culture that we're also noticing, where our election comes with a whole therapy wing. Remember the chaos in Bomas the other day?
Yeah.
Continued under very melodious sounds of a choir.
Yes, that's right.
They didn't stop.
And we had such a debate over this,
singing.
especially with Francis. Yes, that's right.
Francis, last week on, I think, Wednesday, the day after the election, we were at Bomas to meet the choir Makuburi, who are our friends.
St. Kizito.
And St. Kizito. And they performed there as part of this therapy to get Kenyans to cross the elections. I think this is one thing we will start also needing to wean our people off. Because the amount of prayers, you know, you got bishops praying before the IBC commissioners speak.
Yeah.
This level of counseling actually, it's like we're in a drug rehabilitation center. There are a lot of prayers, singing, and more prayers and all that. I don't know whether this is something we see in a positive light, because sometimes it also creates that impression of something could go wrong.
Yeah.
You're being managed.
You're being managed.
Preach peace,
And I think we need to start understanding that the ordinary voter is actually more intelligent than that.
Yeah.
The split screen you were talking about earlier, Jamila, where you had that chaos, one presser by Cherera on one side and Chebukati is announcing results on the other. In 07, an image like that is a signal to apocalypse out there. There'll be chaos all over. But how did Mwananchi react? They watch it like regular television. Yeah. So we need to also rethink this. I mean, we've had our religious leaders working overtime. We appreciate their work, but are we saying we can't handle elections? We need so much of that. I think there is some moderation that we need to have in terms of this therapy, counseling sessions that come to attend to our elections. Let people face the reality of the vote. Is the music, is the prayer making a big difference? I think it is, but can we do it with moderation so that the tallying center doesn't look like another crusade?
You see, talking about a crusade, I sat there for 6 continuous days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that Monday when the results were finally declared. And you could tell that the good thing is, this whole process, Kenyans were peaceful, they were waiting, they were patient. Actually, you can imagine people who voted on Tuesday, they got to know the final verdict of the presidential election on Monday. Yeah. That's the maximum 7 days that IEBC has.
They were anxious but patient.
Yeah, anxious but patient, which I think is a very commendable thing for Kenyans. And this also goes to tell us that if you let institutions do their work, Kenyans are ready and willing to listen and be patient, if you allow the institution to work. But how many of our top leaders are ready and willing to allow the institutions work without interference? That is the next main subject. That is where the discussion is. Because ordinary Kenyans in Banana, where I come from, or Huisero, or Kisumu, or Turkana, ordinarily they wouldn't come and interfere with IEBC, with the judiciary, you know, with these institutions. They wouldn't. Yeah. In fact, they trust them to deliver. But it is the interference that comes with, especially the political class, the top level of it, that brings anxiety even more. When you start hearing stories of numbers are being cooked, we will work on the judiciary is doing this, the chairman of IEBC has done this, the other 4 commissioners are saying this, you let people now start doubting the institutions instead of letting Kenyans trust that these institutions are going to deliver on their mandate. Moving forward, there should be more time, more resources allocated to these institutions to help them grow so that Kenyans can believe that you can go to the polling station, cast your vote, and go home and relax and wait for the results because you believe, firmly so, that IEBC is going to make your vote count and do it the right way. Yeah. Even when somebody is dissatisfied with the results, you believe that the 7 judges of the Supreme Court will sit there and make a decision based on the evidence that has been presented and the merit of the case. You don't have to sit back and start fearing, what if there is interference to rule in this way or that way? Let us grow the institutions. Let us help Kenyans to have more faith in the institutions. And the people who can do that are the leaders we entrust to facilitate these institutions to work, not to impede them by holding them back in one way or another to make them work this way or that way.
Okay, guys, I want us to discuss 2 other issues. By the way, hopefully in the future, we don't have to wait the full 7 days for a result. I mean, you know, we're much further than that. We're much further.
We can do it even in 1 day.
We can.
Because but we have to deal with one fundamental thing that I made an observation at the Bomas of Kenya throughout. 1, mistrust.
Yeah.
Every team believes the other team has some mischief up their sleeves that they want to interfere in one. Didn't you see the drama about a laptop, about UV lights?
I know, yes, who's not allowed to have
a paper,
one,
you know?
Or who's shuffling papers
because
and
it's a question of mistrust, nothing else.
True. Yeah, Linus?
Let me just add to that. Other than mistrust is an efficient election management system that is trustworthy. Again, the issue of trust will come in. You know, and this is a very short story of the minor Kiai ruling. Remember, initially, in the 2007 election and even 2013, the National Tallying Center was sort of the decider in what final results will be released. And so because of that belief that the results are being tampered with at the end of the pipe, which is at the National Tallying Center, and changed, the ruling came and reversed this and said, no, the polling station results will be final.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful ruling. It's the biggest gift the judiciary has ever given to the Kenyan electoral processes. But now here is what, and to the point Francis is making about mistrust. When the results were streaming in, and we had our own tallying center here at the RMS, we had to continuously check, first of all, check, is the form legitimate? Does it belong to the IEBC? Is it stamped? And all those things that constitute due diligence. Because if you don't do that, and we also have another situation where the election of 2017 was nullified on the basis that nobody knew where the numbers were coming from. I mean, Chief Justice then Maraga asked, where are those numbers from? What are those you are displaying on the screen? What are those numbers? And the IEBC itself could not explain where those numbers were coming from. Now, the mistrust right now in this year is about whether what happened at the polling station and what ended in the public portal is legitimate, is correct, is the true reflection of what people said. And a number of things will be coming up when the Supreme Court battle begins, whichever way it takes. The whole question, again, that the Supreme Court dealt with in 2017, the whole question of people who come in and just vote for president and don't vote for these other positions. Because there are some discrepancies that have already been noted, for example, in Kiambu, in Tharaka Nithi, where you have so many people voted for president, and then they didn't vote for governor, the same number did vote for senators.
So where did those ballot papers go, and how is it they just voted for one position and walked out of the polling center?
And you remember it was a question from Deputy CJ
Philomena Mwilu. And even Dr. Smokin Wanjala.
Yes, tell us, you are given 6 ballot papers. So if you vote for president, where do the rest go? That question is likely to be posed if matters go to the Supreme Court this year, because there are a number of counties that have those huge discrepancies in terms of the number of presidential votes compared to the rest of the offices. And again, it's down to the question of trust. I don't know how it works, Francis, but we fix one thing and then the leakage occurs in another because we fix the National Tallying Center. I personally like the de-emphasization of the importance of the National
and that big
Tallying
screen
Center.
with all those numbers that, you know, we all know, if you recall in 2013, we went to sleep seeing one man in the lead. We woke up, the numbers had changed. And remember in 2017 at the Supreme Court, they kept asking, what are those numbers
Where were they
showing?
coming from?
Yeah, on that screen. And you notice then, this time around, it was Enda kwa portal. Yeah.
And remember, Yvonne, one of the issues that I remember CJ Martha Koome talked about a few weeks or months the election was the IEBC needs to fix those issues which were brought up in the 2017 petition so we don't have them again in this election. Because she said that the issues following the nullification of the presidential elections at that time, the electorate was not blamed at all. Even the political class was not blamed at all. Most of the blame was heaped on the IEBC. And she said, I really hope they're going to sort out the issues that came up. Yes, we saw some effort in it this time around. Even one of the issues you're talking about, even at the Bomas of Kenya, the National Tallying Center, there wasn't much happening there. In fact, most of what we saw at the Bomas of Kenya was towards the tail end, I think 3-4 days after the elections. And even the security there was a bit more tighter. I remember we all needed badges with chips. Yeah, you could access some parts of Bomas, but you could not get into the National Tallying Center and all that. But Yvonne, remember that thing we keep talking about, perception and what people see or think when they see the IEBC. Is it the same thing? The mistrust, we don't believe what they're doing, we don't think that they're doing the right thing, we think they're compromised and all that. Having 4 commissioners stand up and say, we think those results are opaque, I think we need to listen to that.
To the 4
IEBC commissioners, we cannot take ownership of the results and then we can continue with the discussion. Yeah, I think while we wait for that, Yvonne.
We have
it. I think we have it now, yes.
As you can see, the 4 of us, we are here, not at Bomas of Kenya, where the results is going to be announced because of the opaque nature of how this phase has been handled. We therefore cannot take ownership on the results that is going to be announced. However, we have an open door that people can go to court. And because of the same, we urge Kenyans to be peaceful because the rule of the law is going to prevail.
And that right there, Yvonne, we've not seen in previous elections. Yeah. We actually have them publicly disagreeing on something as important as the results of the presidential elections. And this has not really helped the perception of IEBC on people's eyes and hearts and minds in terms of are they able to manage a credible, verifiable election? Because here you have scenes where the chairman is attacked. You can see commissioners, those who are there being rushed out of the Bomas of Kenya.
Others we hear
injured and all that. And then
the CEO.
Again the CEO. And then on the other hand, we see now this other group of commissioners who we had expected would be at the Bomas of Kenya to show this united front that these are the results and we own it, saying that we are not a part of this, we don't accept it. What does it say to the Kenyan people in terms of how this election was run? Does it raise fundamental questions? Is it something that can be brought up in court if there's a Supreme petition, a petition that is brought before the Supreme Court by Monday 2 p.m. that what the IEBC commissioners are saying, the 4 who are not agreeing with the president have a point that that can be brought up before the Supreme Court judges.
They have more information,
if they have more information, because clearly they have not really given a lot of information. Yeah. There's a 0.01% number. There's 142,000 being thrown about here. There's the opaqueness that she's talking about. But what exactly are the nitty-gritties of this matter that they 4 commissioners who are not agreeing with it, who have distanced themselves from the presidential results, really have against the results that were announced, leaving Wafula Chebukati, the chairman, alone to give out the certificate and announce the winners of the result of the elections even. So I think that really, in my opinion, really was almost not a good ending for the IBC in these elections, considering the fact that they have really made some strides trying to correct the mistakes that were brought out in the 27 elections.
Yeah, and were you surprised that...
And 4 versus 3, Francis.
Yeah.
What is this with IBC, 4 versus 3?
But, I mean, were you all surprised at what happened? Personally, I wasn't. Because you remember when the ballot papers were arriving, the first batch?
They didn't know.
Yeah.
And some of the commissioners, including the 4 who were there, they were mamas. They were saying they were unaware.
In fact, you remember the chair, Wafula Chebukati, said in that press conference, you know, they were aware, I had informed them, let them say if they're not, if they have any issues with it, as if anybody was going to pipe up and say, yeah, you know, I have an issue. And yeah, but you're right, the crack started to show earlier.
You could see it from the onset.
Yeah.
And actually, it is important to remind ourselves of the circumstances that led us to where we are currently with the 4 new, I would call them new commissioners, because they were appointed later on, versus call them the older commissioners, because they were the other 3 because they were there previously. And you remember for the longest time, IEBC operated with 3 commissioners. Yep. And in fact, that matter came up for discussion at the Supreme Court on the quorum of IEBC during the BBI case, if you remember.
Yes.
And the procedure of appointing the 4 new commissioners, we know very well what had happened that led to their appointment, the 4 of them, the resignation of Akombe, and later the triple resignation of Kurgat, Mwachanya, and Conin Kada, over certain reasons that you can tell even from this process. You know, the truth of the matter is IEBC is a political institution. It is an institution that is created out of political processes. I mean, you will hear stories of which commissioners are allied to who. Even in this election, you could hear all those stories. And so when there was a walkout, some of those discussions that have been, you know, in mamas, you could clearly see them outrightly. Now, what I think would be important is to raise fundamental questions to the 4 commissioners who walked out. What did they know? What didn't they know? When did they know about it? And by any chance, are they also part of a political process? Are they being used for political activity? That is insofar as those 4 are concerned. On the other hand, the chairman and the 2 commissioners, what did they know? What didn't they know? Were they also part of a political process? Were they being used for political reasons? Because none of the 2 sides can say, can distance themselves from the allegations of political interference and political, you know, taking sides in one way or another. But what is also important is to hear what these 4 commissioners, if they would say anything related to this election as part of the Supreme Court process, if it will be. Are they ready, for example, to swear affidavits and say, this is what we knew,
and
this is how, in great detail, because that is how they would help the country. Otherwise, then somebody can easily dismiss them as being used to play a political game.
There's something else I think that we must point out with the electoral management in this country, and that is the role of the executive. The president took over 2 years to replace these commissioners. We had several editorials about this around this table, something that should have been done much sooner. Perhaps, again, the word if, you know, if that had been done earlier, they might have gelled and bonded a little more. We don't know. But regardless of that, it took longer than it should have. Let's also not forget that the IEBC lacked a substantive CEO since the exit of Ezra Chiloba. And that process was held up in the courts for such a long time. In fact, I remember at one point the judges said they have no idea why the IEBC has not proceeded with the recruitment process of doing so even after the case was concluded. Again, that came towards the tail end. You again saw there was maybe what seemed like a disagreement between Ezra Chiloba, who's now at the Communications Authority of Kenya, and the chair, Wafula Chebukati, over those polling stations, 1,100 of them, that did not have access to your 3G network. Yeah. And again, you see that at the end, where Ezra Chiloba says, well, you're the IEBC, so you go and map out those regions. And IEBC says, well, there's this. Let's also not forget that IEBC has been asking consistently for more funding over the last couple of years since 2017. In fact, even for the voter registration exercise, they were not able to do it to the levels that they had wished because they didn't get quite the right funding. Mm-hmm. So there's also been some constraints under which the IEBC has worked, and some of that has been due to the actions of the executive, and you know where we place some of that responsibility, to the extent that these guys work with little resources, things that come late at the end of the day, and they're just, you know, constantly sort of playing catch up with all of these milestones that, you know, they have to meet before, you know, the general election to be able to conduct it in the best way, free, transparent, verifiable process. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that is also something that is worth noting, if at all, as we move forward.
Maybe before Lina weighs in on the executive involvement in elections, here is also something that we need to think of or about as Kenyans. The term of Wafula Chebukati, Professor Gulie, and Boya Molu ends in January next year. Mm. So the 4 commissioners who walked out of this process for one reason or the other, their term just began. Yep. So barring any situation that would revolve around maybe reconstitution of the commission, we will have them again in 2027, the 4 of them, yes, because their term will be ending after the election. Yeah. So it tells you that even as we talk about this quagmire that we find ourselves in as a country, on one hand you have the chairman and 2 commissioners, you also have the vice chair and 3 commissioners on her side. Remember, unless this is addressed, some of these challenges will be imported to the 2027 election. That I thought was something that triggered my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Linus?
Here is the tragedy about the IEBC. The IEBC has undergone a lot of transformation since 2007, especially with the introduction of a new word there, the I, which is supposed to make it really, really independent. But here is my verdict. Samuel Kivuitu, the late Samuel Kivuitu, and his ECK, Electoral Commission of Kenya, did a much better job than all the subsequent electoral bodies that replaced him. And that is, and for the simple reason that the occupants of those offices understood the gravity of the job at hand, the solemnity of the assignment. It's not about who appointed you. It's not about who recommended you for that position. It's about the sheer importance and solemnity of that exercise, of allowing the voter to make their voice heard, and you releasing the results as the voter had indicated. We are missing those kind of people. Samuel Kivuitu's ECK would not have 2 press conferences, not on election day, not on the day that the results are being awaited. They were too either considerate or mature about it, and thoughtful, because this really requires thoughtfulness. When you want to do 2 separate press conferences about an election result, are you thinking about the implication thereof? When you bring in electoral material as if it's some private import without informing the rest of your commissioners, do you understand the implication of that? I think every election seems to come as an indictment of the IEBC. And if this thing goes to the Supreme Court again, because it has not gone yet, we'll know by Monday whether there'll be a Supreme Court petition. And if the court again nullifies the presidential election result, Wafula Chebukati will be making history as a serial indictee of the Supreme Court. You know, in other jurisdictions, in other places, there should not have been any moral strength for Wafula Chebukati to again sit as chairman of the IEBC after the heavy indictment from the Supreme Court in 2017. Because the Supreme Court said, basically, you, IEBC, you, the returning officer, the chairperson of the IEBC, you have bungled this election. You did not follow the law, you did not follow the process. Chebukati proceeded to handle not just the 2017 repeat election, but also the 2022 election. He should hope that if this case ends up in court, in the Supreme Court again, that he is acquitted, because a second indictment would really be problematic. And here is one thing that should be really said about the IEBC. In the IEBC, people get away with murder. In the ECK of 2007, when the country went into a lot of chaos and more than 1,000 people being killed, not a single electoral official was held responsible. In 2017, an election was nullified at a very high cost for the country. They sat pretty. In fact, they afforded very colorful rows where those other commissioners will fight these others, press conferences, and we covered it. It's like a movie. They had all the luxury, and they stayed there taking salaries. There should be, and it is time, responsibility is placed on the door of the IEBC. Their job is serious, and they need to understand that. The job of an IEBC commissioner, the job of an IEBC CEO, IEBC secretariat, and even all the way down to the presiding officer is grave. I mean, look at the things that are happening. The unfortunate death of Daniel.
Yeah.
The unfortunate death of ICT manager Msando.
The shooting of the
Mohamed Kanyare.
Yes.
Mohamed in Eldas.
And Francis, you remember the Kabuchai, the three by-elections, and the things that those people go through.
Yeah.
This is serious business. It is time consequences are also placed upon electoral officials that actually mess elections. And I say this because there is a culture that started in 2013 where we somehow glorify the ability to tamper with the numbers. You know, I remember just a few weeks ago before the elections, the newspapers were talking about the ICT gurus in each of the political formations. They were not being covered in positive light. The insinuation was they are able to do something.
Get in there and do something.
Get in there and probably populate the public portal. These are really, really sad things. And just one final point, because the Supreme Court must remember there are not many just adults out here willing to manage elections fairly, transparently. And that is why the Supreme Court must continue shepherding the processes. Whenever these matters land there, they should do what the courts have always done. Maina Kiai is really a big moment for the management of elections in this country. It has removed the tallying center from being the most important place and taking it to the polling station. Now, if this matter is ending up in the Supreme Court, the 7 Supreme Court judges must move in and sanitize the polling station and the pipe that supplies the election results from the presiding officer to the national chairperson, and that is Wafula Chebukati, so that we make sure that what the presiding officer transmitted is what the voters of that polling station said. And of course, there are smaller things that will always remain the responsibility of parties. And that is ensuring that you have agents who are actually ensuring that what is being done at the polling station is legal and the voice of the voter is being protected in exactly the same words that that voter is using. So the challenge will be to the Supreme Court. If this ends up there again, go to the polling station, please audit this pipe that transmit the results from the presiding officer to Wafula Chebukati.
I saw something.
You get the final word.
Yeah, I saw something very interesting when I was looking through the Forms 34A. Quite a number of them, I realized, did not have agents of this presidential candidate or that presidential candidate, particularly the main ones. And that tells you something. The cost of having agents across the country, 46,229 polling stations, is not a simple thing. It's a very expensive affair. And I think that explains how and why our elections are still very expensive. Lastly, I think it is important to talk about the number of rejected votes in this election. particularly in the presidential election, 113,114. I had some very interesting experiences with some of the officers who are managing these elections, some of the returning officers who came to the Bomas of Kenya. Of course, they have the oath of secrecy, so they can't tell you some of these things in details. But they were saying some very interesting things about how people marked the ballot papers. You know, they would go and write the 5th or something like that.
Oh, no,
some of them would, you know, make all manner of jokes on that ballot paper, and tells you that there's still some way to go in terms of civic education. I mean, you can imagine 113,000 people queued, wasted their time only to go and spoil a ballot. Yeah? And those instances where the numbers are not adding up, I saw during the elections on various polling stations that I toured, the deputy presiding officer was kinda escorting people when they are voting to help you drop this paper, the green paper, the box with the green
white
lid,
in the white,
you know, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So it would, you know, surprise me how the numbers don't add up, because they should add up. And they were strict in the sense that if you go to the clerk 1 was giving you 2 ballot papers. Clerk 2, 2 ballot papers. Clerk 3, 2 ballot papers. So no one went to a polling station and was only given a presidential ballot paper or a governor ballot paper. So the numbers should add up. Yeah. In any case, there are also a few questions as to the number of people who actually turned up to vote. You remember at one point during the briefings by the chairman, he told us a reading of the KIMS kits tells us that we had 65.5% turnout. And then the numbers seemed to change, and then we were told the manual numbers would also add to that percentage. So maybe IBC will need to keep clarifying how many people exactly turned up to vote for this election, from the MCA level to the presidential level.
Absolutely. All these questions.
But they'll need to be in one place to do that, right?
Absolutely.
That's correct. It's not over until it's over. And that is when a president will be sworn in. Now, of course, that'll depend on a presidential election petition. Here, this time next week, we will know if we're going the Supreme Court route or not. If not, by the 30th day of August, President-elect William Ruto will be sworn in as president. If there will be a Supreme Court petition, we'll have to wait a little longer for that part of this electioneering period that actually marks the end of the same. And that marks the end of this show. So we will be back here again next week on Thursday. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. This was great. We called it sort of the post-election edition, but I think we're still quite some ways away from that yet. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thank you for your feedback. The hashtag is NewsGang. Keep the conversations coming. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Good night.